how you can get a job in the field of computer science. And then he's going to talk about GitHub. So if you guys want to pay attention, that'd be awesome. And then maybe you guys can do something with your degree when you're done. Introducing Josh.
Thank you for that warm reception. So I put this slide together because I thought I might be able to keep the title of the talk a secret. That's obviously not going to work. But so we'll skip the best joke in my talk. Basically, at the pub night in September, I got a lot of feedback about what people wanted to hear, and this was a big one. Was people didn't know, what do you do with a computer science job other than just blindly fire resumes out into the wild? So it's a topic of interest, and as somebody who has interviewed on both sides of the table, I thought I would give a little bit of my experience. So who am I? I'm Josh Hayes-Sheen. I'm a senior software engineer at Workiva. I've been programming professionally for just about 10 years now, and about 7 years ago I was in about the same seat as most of you. I was here at Alabama University studying computer science and wondering how the heck I was ever going to find a job. Since then, I've been working with a whole bunch of great programmers, and I've even, like I said, I've been doing interviewing myself as well. And it's really made me think a lot about what makes somebody stand out when you're looking at a programmer. So I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit between what I feel made me successful and what I look for when I'm interviewing somebody to work with as a coworker or anything like that. I'm not going to say that this is a guaranteed path to success for anybody, and there are definitely alternative paths, but this is what worked for me, and I hope that it's helpful for you as well. So what worked for me? I mean, I live and breathe computers. I've been programming since I was about 14, but a lot of that time was spent wasting time. I got frustrated and I threw away a lot of code, and I wrote a lot of code that I didn't actually learn anything from. But what was great was that writing code all the time gave me a lot of skills and experience that I was able to eventually turn into job opportunities. So the key kind of point there is writing code. You should be writing code. You should be writing code in school. You should be writing code on the side. You should try to be writing code for hobby projects, for co-op terms, for anything like that you can do. I actually got my first programming job when I submitted patches. I was working at a call center, and we were using some open source software that had a really annoying bug in it. So I fixed the bug, and then the IT group there hired me on because I was really cheap compared to hiring other programmers because I was still a student. And that was how I got started in programming as a career. And then starting in university, I started to store pretty much all of my code online. So I have a record of all the code that I've written for about the last 6 or 7 years. And what was really cool was that when I've been interviewed for different positions, I've been able to reference that code and walk through it with interviewers to explain to them, the code and that I understand it, to indicate that I understand it, and maybe how I've changed since I wrote that code. So when I'm interviewing, what do I look for? One of the big things I look for is experience. And, a lot of people say, how do I get experience when nobody wants to pay me to work? And the big thing there is we actually have it easier in our field than in just about any other field. Ask somebody with a law degree or a bio degree how they pad up their resume, and you'll be very sad with what you do. We have a lot of opportunity that other fields don't have. I think that writing code in the past, like competently writing code, is the best indicator of somebody who's going to be able to write code in the future and do pretty well at it. So one thing that is an awesome way to start is with a passion project. And that's something that's a personal project that you work on for fun. It's okay if it sucks, because you can talk about why it sucks, and you can talk about what you've learned from writing this crappy project. And it's just a great way to hone and practice your skills. I had a project that I rewrote in several different languages, just because then I knew what the problems were, and I could use it to teach myself new languages and new programming frameworks and things like that. And that was really helpful. Programming in a void is really hard. If you don't have goals and reasons to write code, it's really hard just to sit down at a blank canvas and just write code that you can reference later or that you can learn anything from. So, take a popular website and write a clone of it, or take a game or anything like that, or make a tool that's just useful, even if it's only useful to you. All of those things are really useful things to do with your time because they build your skills and they build a portfolio for you. And speaking of a portfolio, I want to talk about how I think that is really super duper valuable. There's not really any better way when you're searching for a job to show your skills. We've done coding on the whiteboard in job interviews, and it's pretty universally agreed that that's miserable. Nobody likes to do that. It's stressful, it's really hard, and it's a lot of times it's really embarrassing. And we've also tried homework, where after an interview we send somebody home with a question to give a follow-up for, and that also sucks. We'll do it if we have no other options, but it's really not fun. And I'm going to talk later tonight, I'm going to talk more about GitHub, because I think that's the best place for any programmer to build a portfolio right now. So, other things that I look for, I actually think that school assignments can be a good opportunity. You can polish and post assignments that you're particularly proud of on your GitHub. Sometimes you have to check with your teachers for permission. Sometimes they don't like people putting their solutions online. But you can go above and beyond on a lot of assignments and really polish that code and get good comments and get well-formatted code and everything like that. And that can be a piece in your portfolio piece. It doesn't matter that it's a school assignment. And it can also be a great discussion piece. Creative code in particular, creative projects are really awesome for this. I have a link in here that's to a project that I did in the games design course here that was an awesome piece of fun and that we had a lot of great fun with, and I think it is a great piece in my portfolio. As well, if you're already working somewhere, even if you don't think it's going to be your long-term career, learn everything you can from it. If it's related to programming at all, try and build your portfolio. If you're working on public-facing websites or anything like that, those can be portfolio pieces. If you're working on projects that aren't public-facing, you can still learn a lot from them, and you can still discuss them in interviews without breaking your NDA. There's surprising depth in technical conversation that you can have without getting to the level of detail that is going to cause you any kind of problems if it's a private project or anything like that. So the next place that's awesome for us is open source. Open source is such a huge opportunity for all of us to learn and contribute to a community. I'm a Reddit contributor, and you could be too. I linked on there to the Reddit bug tracker. My contribution is a 1-character change. It was 2 commits, and it took me 11 months to get it merged. Before I graduated university, though, I contributed to at least 3 different open source projects. And if you go to any framework or any open source project that you're using, they'll almost always have a bug tracker. And just spin through the bug tracker looking for something easy. And then you can just dive in and fix it. And it is an awesome experience, and it teaches you how to use a lot of these tools and how to read through a code base and fix bugs. There's so much awesome stuff you can learn from doing that. You can also do things like update documentation and wikis. So that's a good way to show that you understand their code and you can communicate about it. And you can even write tutorials. This is a little bit sometimes like the blind leading the blind, but you will be shocked at how much you learn writing to try and teach somebody else, as I have been doing any of these presentations. So it's really, really an awesome place to learn and to build your resume. So something else that worked for me was, like, after writing code and after all those different opportunities to write code, was networking, which is in all kinds of forms of networking, and not just the computer form of networking. So I met a lot of my current coworkers in school. I used to argue with one of my classmates over technical topics all the time, and then he recommended me for a job because he knew I wasn't a pushover and that I knew technical stuff. I met coworkers and employers while volunteering as well. I learned a lot of great things just while volunteering. I used to volunteer with an environmental organization in town, and I acted as assistant administrator for them as well as I updated their website. And I got a lot of great technical mentorship from the people who were there volunteering at the same time doing similar tasks, as well as great experience. I learned, to work with an organization like that, and it connected me to contract work later, where people involved in that had regular jobs that needed programmers, and it did connect me to work through there as well. Oh, and I did have on there as well, volunteering is great because you can save the world when you can feel like you are sometimes. So other things that work for me, like I said, participating in open source, it's more than just the technical side of things. I learned a lot about communication and a lot about working with people. One of the big things that I learned was that a lot of programmers are jerks. And that's okay. You don't want to work with jerks, but you do have to be able to, and you have to be able to deal with people who are jerks. And open source is a relatively easy way to do that without having to be really confrontational or have your job at risk because you can't work with somebody or anything like that. So yeah, it taught me a lot about communicating on technical topics, and one of the big things was how to ask questions without the answer being a chore. So I link as well to here to the SMART questions, frequently asked questions, which is a great document on basically how to do the bare minimum to not ask a question that people will hate you for. So if you go into like a chat room and you say, is anyone here? People will hate you for that. If you say, can anybody help me with my question? That's a bad question. That's a question that has no value except to waste people's time. So just ask your question and do your bare amount of research and things like that. Skills like that you can learn just by participating in an open source community. Join the forums, get on IRC, get on Slack, mailing lists. And if you're doing that coding and if you're doing that documentation or anything like that, that's a great place to develop those skills. And it's a great way to just practice reading code and documentation as well, because it's all there, it's all open. So when I'm interviewing and I'm looking for this kind of indicators that somebody is good at communication and good at networking, what I want to see is that you actually want to be a programmer, that you enjoy either writing code or solving problems. Events like this one are a great start. Think about what you would talk about if you were up here. And there's also other events like Global Game Jam, Spikeathon, Startups Usain Brain. Those are great opportunities to get out and meet other programmers and talk about technical topics and to learn from each other, which is a really great opportunity. So I also look for things that indicate passion, that indicate that you are excited about programming, or at least that you are very interested in it. Language and tool holy wars are kind of integral to the history of our field. PHP sucks, Python rules, and I'm very passionate about that. Don't let them bog you down, but it's not a bad thing to be fired up and to be excited about something like that, even if it's a little bit geeky. You don't have to spend all your free time coding. Some people feel like this means you have to spend every weekend or every evening coding, and that's not true. It just means that when you're doing it, you are interested in it. It's not a bog, it's not a chore. That you are actually wanting to do it and that you want to be good at it is a key thing that I'm looking for. Even if you're not good at it, if you want to be good at it, that counts for a lot. And those are some of the indicators that I'm going to look for that show me that you want to be good at programming. And one big thing that's a good indicator too is you should know more than what you're being taught in class. Our field moves really quickly, and part of being a programmer is learning new things and teaching yourself new things. So hopefully you'll have something on your resume or something to discuss that, like I said, I went through this program, I'm still involved here, I keep an idea of what's being taught here and at the college and things like that. And knowing something that's outside of the curriculum here is a really solid indicator that you do care about what you're doing and you're interested in the field. I want to take a moment here to talk about soft skills as well, specifically. So I hear this sentiment frequently that programmers aren't good with people, and there's that kind of stereotype of the neckbeard, Cheeto-covered programmer, and I don't think that that's the case anymore with with many programmers, anyways. The thing is, programming doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're almost always going to be talking to somebody, whether it's your teammates, whether it's a client, whether it's your management, and they're going to be giving you either direction or feedback, and you have to be able to communicate back and forth with people for that. As well, communities online, places like GitHub and Stack Overflow are really important. If you're afraid to ask questions, you're going to have a really hard time being frustrated and not making any progress. So communication is a skill just like Java. Anybody can learn it, and if you practice it, you'll get better, even if you suck at it for a while. That's okay. So for me specifically, talks like these really help me out. They're really scary, and my terror level is currently at orange. I'm not a natural public speaker, but I learn, every time I do something like this, I learn something and I get a little bit better at it. Working in a call center actually helped me out a lot. Talking to people all day long with the ability to hang up on them if I was freaking out was really nice. I never actually had to hang up on somebody, but having the safety net was really empowering, let's say. And then, yeah, like I said, participation in forums, IRC mailing lists, things like that, it gave me confidence specifically to speak on technical topics. Because I would see people in these environments saying things that were stupid, that I knew to be wrong, and if they weren't afraid to talk, I knew that I had to speak up. So some of the things that worked for me as well, people always used to tell me, you know, when confidence does help a lot, people always used to tell me make it till you make it. I hated that. It doesn't work, not for me at least. What really did help for me was learning one or two technical topics really in depth, and then I could use them to relate to just about any other technical conversation. Sometimes I'm sure I sounded like an idiot talking about how, oh, this is just like how Java hash maps work or something like that. But it really did give me some grounding in technical conversations to be able to actually confidently have a conversation and not just be lost or, you know, too shy or anything like that. And so I learned, that was kind of how I got started, and then the last 10 years I've just been picking topics and learning them top to bottom, and now there's very few new topics. Even if I know I don't know anything about a topic, it's fine for me to just jump into the middle of it, because I'm very confident that I'll always find something I can relate to something that I already know. So whatever works for you in that regard, but it is good to have a little bit of confidence to talk, and that's in a technical sense. That is meaningful as a programmer in your career, not just general life advice. The other big thing is to not be afraid of failure. After talking about confidence, I want to talk about failure. To program is to fail over and over and over again until for one shining instant you don't fail, and then you immediately move on to your next problem and start failing again. If you let failure discourage you, you'll never be able to learn on your own, which is really critical in our field. And it's not shameful to fail. It's not embarrassing. It shouldn't shake your confidence. Learning from failure is part of our job. And the only thing you want to try and do is you want to try and avoid repeating the same failures over and over again. Find new and exciting ways to fail, and be proud of showing people how you failed in this totally unique way. So in terms of those soft skills, when I'm interviewing, what I'm looking for specifically, so, you know, we know people are going to be stressed out in an interview. That's pretty normal. Everybody that we talk to when we're on the interviewer side of the table, we always know people are going to be stressed. That's fine. Sometimes it makes it hard to separate when someone is being an idiot versus when someone is being an idiot just because they're stressed. So if you have a little bit of that confidence and you have a little bit of that coolness under pressure, it just helps us avoid false positives, where we might think that you're bad just because you're panicking. And that's not necessarily fair. And we certainly don't, it's not like a requirement, like we don't look for people who are cool under pressure as a rule, but it really helps in just not getting confused from either side of the table. Another surprising thing that we see is we see a lot of mistakes on resumes that are kind of embarrassing, I think. We see spelling mistakes, and we see like weird formatting mistakes, like, oops, I triple indented this bullet point, but not the rest of them, or something like that. We see really childish email addresses and things like that. The resume is one where you can't blame it on being stressed out. You have all the time in the world to prepare your resume. Make sure it's polished. Have a friend read it over for you. Like, sometimes it's really hard to see your own mistakes, so having somebody else look at it for you is really helpful. But that's one that, you know, try not to make mistakes there, because that's really hard to recover from sometimes. Another big piece there is try to avoid one-word answers. When we ask you a question in an interview, most of the time, we want an interview to be a discussion. If we ask you a question and you give us a one-word answer, it's kind of a missed opportunity. You know, you should be able to showcase your skills and be prepared to discuss the question back and forth. If you ask a question, it's very rare that just the answer to that question directly is what we're looking for. I mean, maybe if it's like, hey, what's your email address or something like that. But if we ask you, what's your experience with this framework? You know, be prepared to say, here, you know, let me talk about this project that I did with it, or I have no experience with that framework, but I heard it's just like this other one that I used. You know, there's lots of opportunities there. So be prepared in an interview to have some discussion. And it's an example of those soft skills that you need to be prepared for. So sometimes what we'll do in interviews as well, sometimes we're going to ask really hard questions. And it's okay to not know the answer to a question and to admit that you don't know the answer. But you should still try to answer it anyways. Try to whiteboard it out, think out loud. Sometimes, you know, we don't care if you know the answer in a lot of cases to a lot of these questions. We want to know how you approach hard problems. We want to know how you know, do you just immediately give up when somebody gives you a problem that you don't know the answer to, or do you actually try to think your way through it? That's really important. So kind of be prepared for that. Reverse from that, we'll occasionally ask really easy questions. Sometimes when we can see that somebody is panicking or something like that, we'll ask a question that hopefully they know the answer to. And it gives them a chance to showcase their communication skills. And it gives them a chance to kind of calm down and get that confidence of knocking a question out of the park. So it's good if you can set us up for that sometimes as well. Where if you have something that you're really confident in, make sure we know that. Make sure it's, you know, in big bold letters on your resume. Make sure you talk about it in some of the other questions, things like that. Give us the opportunity to hear about your expertise rather than just have to dig it out. And be prepared. Sometimes we will ask really weirdly specific questions. If you're in a programming interview, it's likely that there is a mountain of programming experience at the table across from you. So if you put some weird niche thing on your resume that you tried for 10 minutes one time, there's a really good chance that someone at the table has real experience with it and might ask you for your opinions on conventions in that framework or what you think about the community around it or anything like that. So don't BS on your resume about things you don't know anything about, because you're very likely to get caught. There's a lot of very experienced programmer interviews for the most part. So just as a really quick wrap up, you know, the takeaways from this, I think the single most important thing is just to write code as often as you can. You have to be writing code. Once you're employed in your career in a long-term job, you should be writing code probably every day. But until then, or even after then, you should still be trying to, you know, find opportunities to write code and make sure that you're holding on to that code and able to either learn from it directly or post it in a place that you can reference it as work experience, because it is. So yeah, you want to put your code online and you want to link it from your resume if you can. If you have a GitHub account that is active at all, put it on your resume, absolutely. I think it's the best portfolio that a programmer can have, and I'll talk about that again later today. And then, yeah, don't ignore communication. Communication is a valuable technical skill. Practice it whatever you can, and don't use stereotypes as an excuse to avoid it. And finally, just embrace failure. Be prepared. You know, your programs are going to fail to compile. Libraries will have weird, confusing bugs. Communities will suck, and you won't be able to get good answers out of them. Things like that. And part of what makes every programmer that I know who is successful is the ability to encounter a really hard problem and just continue working through it. If you encounter a really hard problem and you stop, like you just give up, you're not going to go anywhere as a programmer. You have to be ready to fight through it. So that's all I've got to say on that topic. Does anybody have any questions? What's up?
You mentioned some weirdly specific questions. Do you have any kind of example? I'm kind of curious of what would be asked during the interview, for example. Not even really specific, just really any questions like that.
Mm-hmm. So I've had people with Cold Fusion experience, which is a language built on top of Java by Adobe. And I wrote Cold Fusion for about 3 years when I worked for the federal government. And I know a lot about that language. And we've had people put it on there, and I asked them their opinions about certain tags in the language, certain functions that were used by the programmer, things like that. We've had people that put SQL experience on their resume, and we'll ask them to do you know what a recursive query looks like in SQL? Do you know, some people can't even do like a join, like a left join or anything like that. So I mean, we've had some pretty specific ones. We have some really specific ones on like caching strategies and things like that. So. Anybody else?
Do you have any tips, like if your confidence has been diminished by like
Yeah, so if your confidence has been diminished, it is hard. Like I said, I got all this terrible advice on how to improve my confidence. I mean, you kind of have to find what works for you, which is a huge cop-out answer. What worked for me was building my knowledge in, like I said, in specific technical fields. So I learned C++ inside and out. I knew a lot about the Linux kernel. These were things that I could teach myself on my own. And then once you get like a deep knowledge in some technical area, you're going to find that there is a lot of crossover between those. So confidence, I am talking largely in about the technical sense, and that be able to be confident in technical conversations. So I mean that depth of knowledge, even if it's not in what the conversation is currently about, if you have somewhere in the ballpark, that's going to be really helpful. And you're going to feel confident because someone will say something that you know. And even if it's not directly in the thing that you know because it's similar to the thing that you do know. And that's what I found really helpful, was to kind of build that. The other thing is, I mean, everybody gets pumped up by success. So you can go to, like I said, these open source projects and these bug trackers and things like that, and you can find easy tickets and you can find easy bugs. And sometimes it's stupid things like typos and error messages and things like that. But you can fix them. Like it's well within your ability to fix them. And then you do get a boost from that. Like it feels good to have a change, accepted by this community project or anything like that. I hope that helps.
So I was going to jump up there. I'm not as technical as the rest of the world. I'm the simple man. But basically what you're saying is it's all about building your own personal brand. This is what you're good at. This is what your weaknesses are. This is where you're going. So you're marketing yourself. You're basically building. That's how you get a job. Whether it's computer science or any other industry, you're selling yourself. That's
So the gist of it would be that you are building a brand around yourself and that you're marketing yourself. And I do think that that's true. And this talk, I wanted to kind of mainly focus on the technical aspects of that, how it applies to programmers. But I definitely think that's true. Yeah, you want to stand out from everybody else. There's going to be, however many thousand computer science graduates in Canada this year, and in North America, and you're kind of competing on a global marketplace. People can program remotely and things like that. So you do need to have something that sets you out from the crowd. And that personal brand is a really good way to describe that. A portfolio and like a demonstration is a really good way to do that.
Right, it's probably the same in any field.
Yeah, I think it's the same.
Like, in computer science, where we're definitely talking about the nature, but it's like that one probably branding for you. You need to be able to showcase what the field is now.
Well, you teach military history. What's that mean to you for the rest of the other 1,000 doctorates that graduated applying for the state free position in North America?
Would you say, out of curiosity, I can't fix opinions on this, but would you say there's probably, I agree with the branding stuff, but do you believe that right now there's an abundance of computer science related jobs for people to try to get into?
So the question is there, in my opinion, an abundance of computer science related jobs for people to get into?
Yeah.
I think that there are. I think that the competition in the field is heating up as a lot of other countries are starting to build their education systems to the point that they can compete on that global market, whereas before that wasn't necessarily true. I still think that there's plenty out there. I think that there's a lot of situations that you can apply programming skills and computer science skills to that people don't really appreciate and don't recognize, where you can go into a lot of jobs with those computer skills and understand what problems can be solved through programming and what can't be. And you can take those, so some of the best programmers, two of the best programmers that I know, one of them comes from a biology background and one of them comes from a linguistics background. And the crossover between computer science and other fields is pretty high. So you can find opportunities there. If you look at what's happening with like AI and robotics and things like that right now, and virtual reality and things like that, computing is starting to make its way into aspects of the real world. that it has never been in before. Whereas before it was always just the keyboard and the screen. Now it's a lot more prevalent in our lives. And it was very, computing is everywhere before, but it's getting even more everywhere now. So I don't think we're going to see a real, desperate shortage anytime soon. But like I said, you're seeing more and more computer science curriculums all over the world. So you do need to be prepared to excel and stand out and to build that brand for yourself.
Once again, I'm going to, insult them, or most people. But so now, is there computer science, right? That's like history.
Yeah.
That's also we can kind of meet there. Now, is there specialization in computer science programming? Because like in history, it would be Canadian history, the Japanese history, European history, social history, gender, politics history. There's so many different substratas. Is that still, is there an equivalent, is that the same thing in like programming where you're not just a programmer?
Yeah. So the question is, computer science is a pretty big blanket term, and what kind of specializations are there, within computer science, or are there many? And the answer is, oh my God, yes. There are so many specializations of computer science, it is ridiculous. When you look at games design, I work in distributed systems in the back end. We have awesome front-end engineers. Yeah, I know. Until you specialize into some of these fields, some of them you will have never even heard of before. But the longer you work as a programmer, and if you look around, look at just about anything, and you will find a way that computer science can be applied to it. Sometimes it's really niche. Audio engineers, for example, and signal processing and things like that. Video processing, there was some great things, articles that came out today about H.264 and how it works and things like that. It really is everywhere in our lives, and because of that hyper specialization is really common. You can be a good programmer and just kind of be like the generic programmer, but there are huge opportunities to be made if you can find an area to specialize in that you are good at and that you're interested in and that you can become really good at. And then you'll end up as one of, maybe 300 people in the whole world who can actually do that kind of work or anything like that. There's huge opportunity there.
As opposed to the 300 people who might be program something C basic, is that even the right language?
Yeah, well that's something, programming is actually getting easier and easier, right? A lot of modern languages are coming out now, and when you look at even things like Unreal Engine, where you can kind of copy and paste the game together and things like that, Flutter is the new one on some of the mobile devices and things like that. It makes it really easy to build. So that kind of generic programming, hopefully the goal, they've been talking about teaching it in elementary school, teaching basic programming in elementary school. So you should probably be better at, better than the general populace at basic programming. Yeah, you want to find that kind of specialization.
After C-DOS runs, DOS, once Windows came out, I gave up. Okay, that was why there. So I did myself there a lot. It used to take days to download a 3-minute song. Okay, that's not a myth. That's a fact.
Any other questions? I do have another talk lined up after this, so we can take a break, and then I'll get to that. All right, well, I'm going to be around, so just come and ask me if you have any questions, and we'll take like 5 minutes here or something like that, and then I'll talk a bunch about Git, which is a much more specifically technical topic, which I hope will also be useful to you.